Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Quarles Maurer, and I would like to welcome all of you to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. Sorry, technical difficulties. This morning, we are happy to be able to welcome you to our Zoom sanctuary. We are once again gathering together in the morning in our own separate spaces and making one big communal space. This morning, unfortunately, we will not have music played by the lovely Carly Shell, but we are blessed indeed to have Lisa Jokiel to play our hymns for us, in addition to doing the whole service. We'd also like to send a shout out to Rick Dusky for being our technology lead today. For over 50 years, the UUFP has been a liberal religious voice in the Pottstown area. As UUs, we believe that reason and wonder can coexist, that we can honor the teachings of those who've gone before, even as we explore our way into the future. And we believe that no one is outside the circle of justice and compassion. We hope that your spirit and your heart and your mind are refreshed this morning as we commit ourselves once again to our 7 guiding principles. We come together this Sunday morning and every Sunday morning, not because we share a creed, but because we share a promise. We promise to support one another on our spiritual journeys. Our services are different each week, but the loving kindness we offer one another in this community remains the same. So whoever you are, wherever you are, whomever you love, we are glad that you came to see us today. And now is the time for announcements. So if anyone has announcements, you can just kind of wave your hand a little bit and unmute yourself and give your announcement so everyone can hear.
Good morning. I'm Miranda, and I'm happy to tell you that in 2 weeks, that'll be on Sunday the 13th, there's a bunch of us that are going to get together for a UU 101 session. This is for anyone that would like to come, and also for people who are considering membership. And it's being offered by the membership committee, of course, and Reverend Carrie and Reverend Dave. If you'd like to attend this session, you can email me at memberservices@uupottstown.org.
There are no other announcements. I just wanted to say that I have not forgotten about joys and concerns. For my program today, I've decided to put it at the beginning of the coffee hour, and that's because we often mention people's names and their situations, and I'm a little uncomfortable with letting it go on to the videotape recording that goes out into the world. So don't feel like we forgot it. Emily will take over at that point and start with joys and concerns and then go into the regular coffee hour conversation. Just wanted to let you know. Okay. Emily's going to light the candle. And while she does that, I want to hold up a beautiful picture taken by Ansel Adams just before. And that's of winter at Yosemite Park. Very beautiful. Go ahead. The words to go with it are these. He said in his autobiography, "We finally emerged at Valley View. The splendor of Yosemite burst upon us, and it was glorious. Little clouds were gathering in the sky above the granite cliffs, and the mists of Bridal Veil Fall shimmered in the sun. We trailed dust as we gathered speed on the level valley floor. One wonder after another descended upon us. I recall not only the colossal, but the little things, the grasses, the ferns, cool atriums in the forest. The river was mostly quiet and greenish deep. Sentinel Fall and Yosemite Falls were booming in early summer flood, and many small shining cascades threaded the cliffs. There was light everywhere. Okay, our first hymn is going to be 175 if you keep hymnals and you follow along. And I have some background to give it. First, I want to send a faraway thank you to Reverend Dave Farrington, who, when he retired several years ago, gave me 5 older Unitarian hymnals and a commentary on our Singing the Living Tradition, which is called, not surprisingly, Between the Lines. We Celebrate the Web of Life was written by Alicia Carpenter, and she is a contemporary Unitarian composer and musician. And she has given this, she won, it was commissioned by UUA to go into singing the living tradition. And so that makes it very special. And the tune was borrowed from a Welsh composer. Emily will read the words and then I'll play through it twice.
We celebrate the web of life, its magnitude we sing, for we can see divinity in every living thing. A fragment of the perfect whole in cactus and in quail, as much in tiny barnacle as in the great blue whale. Of ancient dreams we are the sum, our bones link stone to star, and bind our future worlds to come with worlds that were and are. Respect the water, land, and air which gave all creatures birth. Protect the lives of all that share the glory of the earth.
The dog needs to make way for me. At this point, I would like to ask Linda to read what I have made be our opening words for today. And Linda Kay was nice enough to write this for me for our August program. And as I read it, I accidentally overlooked a very important part of it. And plus, this gives you a chance to hear Linda give it herself. And it bears repeating. Go ahead, Linda.
Well, thank you. And what Lisa had asked was, what did conservation mean to me? And the way I looked at it was more how I became aware of the need for conservation. I don't believe I became aware of the word conservation until I was well into my teens. However, my earliest memories do include my father constantly telling us that we do not waste, ... fill in whatever it is. We just don't waste. Before I go on, you need to understand a bit about my father. He was born in 1923, the fourth of 8 children to Polish immigrants. He grew up on a 14-acre farm in Hatfield, PA, where the primary purpose of the farm was to feed the family and to offer things to trade with other farmers. Grandpop raised chickens and the farm next door raised pigs. So basically everybody got bacon and eggs if you worked together. But he did know food scarcity growing up. I think anybody growing up during the Depression is going to know scarcity. And he did know food scarcity. You also need to understand before I go on is that the farm that he grew up on didn't have indoor plumbing until the late 40s. In fact, I remember as a child going and there was still the functional outhouse. And if you were outside playing, you used that. And you also need to understand that my father joined the Navy during World War II. When you are on a ship, you learn the value of fresh water. So how did this parenting style of we do not waste show up in my childhood? Well, first, as I said, we don't waste water. In my house, you did not just turn on the shower, wash your hair, condition your hair, wash your body, shave your legs, and then turn off the water. No, my father installed a fitting at the shower head where you could turn the water off and on there. You didn't have to play with the faucets. You just turned it off at the shower head. So showers in my house went like this. Turn the water on to the temperature that you wanted. You wet your body, then you turned it off. And then you put the shampoo in your hair. If you want to rinse it out, turn the water back on. Once you're done, turn it off, lather up, turn it on. I think you get the gist of what we were doing. And it was very common in my house to hear my father banging on a wall at somebody in the shower going, "You're wasting water." All this activity was done with the water off. I continued to do this through college and my early adulthood. And my husband even asked me early on in our relationship what exactly I was doing in the shower with the water going on and off. So it was a hard habit to break, but I justify it now because we have low flow shower heads. So I feel like I'm saving water that way. The other ways that we didn't waste water was to put bricks into the toilet tank. And this is before you had low, I don't know what they call them, low volume flush toilets. This is back when they filled the entire tank. By putting the bricks in, the tank required less water to fill it because of the displacement caused by the bricks. My father even figured it out with respect to each toilet, how many bricks or partial bricks it took to get a functional flush. I'll never forget being at a friend's house when their father was fixing the toilet and there were no bricks. I really thought everybody did this. We also had what I call a brown water pitcher on the kitchen counter. So if you didn't drink all the liquid in your cup or glass, the exception being milk products because you had to drink all your milk, you poured what was remaining, and that included coffee, tea, water, into this jug, and this jug was then used to water plants. While I don't put bricks in my toilet tank, because they have made great progress with minimizing wasted water, I still do have a brown water pitcher on my kitchen counter that I use to water my plants. The other big item that we did not waste was food. With 4 growing kids, leftovers were a rarity. However, when we did have some, you didn't throw them out. My father's philosophy was that any leftover could be used one of 2 ways. Either fry it up with an egg and have it for breakfast. Imagine my surprise when I found out that hash browns were not fried leftover mashed potatoes. Or you put it in a pot and make soup out of it. I never knew until my adulthood that there were actual recipes for making soup and that it was more complicated than just throwing the carcass of whatever meat we may have eaten and other leftover vegetables into a pot. I will admit my mother did make it taste good. So while I don't clean out my refrigerator by making soup, I do have a clean out the refrigerator meal about every 7 to 10 days. And while the meal is a hodgepodge of items, nothing gets thrown out. In fact, I have my husband trained such that when I ask him what he wants for dinner, his response is is there anything we have to eat in the refrigerator? Meaning, is there anything that's going to go bad? So I've trained him well. What can I say? Another lesson was that it was okay to pick up meat with bones. So you could pick up your chicken leg and eat it with your fingers at the dinner table, because that is the only way to truly clean the meat off bones. So chicken, pork chop, ribs were all fair game. And I was always amazed that when I thought I had really cleaned the meat off my bones, my father would take it and get even more off. I have no appreciation of what clean bones look like. Needless to say, I do not order any meat on a bone when I am in public now. To this day, I still pick things up by my hands. And yes, you had to eat everything on your plate. And we never got the "there are starving children in some country" rationale for cleaning your plate. Again, reminder, my father grew up on a farm. We got an animal or plant, gave its life so you can have life. You need to show respect for that and clean your plate. I guess growing up on a farm and having to kill the livestock for dinner gives you a whole different perspective than someone who's used to getting their meats on a styrofoam plate wrapped in plastic at the supermarket. I am, however, grateful that while he enjoyed liver and pickled pig's feet, he never forced us to eat that. We did, however, grow up eating a fair amount of scrapple, because you just don't waste things, which, as the name states, is just all the scraps that didn't make it to the market in another form. Actually, if you slice it really thin and fry it with some ketchup, really quite good. I could go on with more stories about how I grew up and how I learned not to waste. However, I'll close by saying that the circumstances with which my father grew up in gave him a respect for the fact that food and water are limited resources and sometimes scarce or non-existent resources. And you just have to read the news to see how this fact continues to ring true today for so many people. So while he didn't teach me conservation, he taught me respect for the resources that we as humans have required to live. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. Very beautiful commentary. I have some commentary of my own on how I became aware of the need for conservation. First of all, my program today is dedicated to three people. The late Peggy Jones, who together with her good friend Gladys Smith, were the quiet backbone of this fellowship for a long time. They were always there to help, to listen, and to support all of us. I shall always miss seeing the two of them seated together at the back of the sanctuary. The third person is my mother, Reva Shue Alexander, a very liberal Lutheran who gave me my appreciation of nature. She was, among other things, for several years the director of the 4th to 6th grade campers at two Lutheran overnight summer camps, and those were Lutherland in Butler, Pennsylvania, and Nawakwa in Biglersville, PA, near Gettysburg. She dragged me along as a preschooler, too young for any of the activities, and she dragged my grandmother along to take care of me. One of the activities assigned to the real campers was to go out alone in the woods before breakfast and think your own thoughts about nature. Even though I couldn't do that activity, I developed a greater appreciation of nature simply by being at camp. The scent of the clean spring water coursing from the ground and the scent of the mosses has stayed with me all this time. Years later, I would hear compliments about my mother from people then in middle age about what that experience of being alone in nature meant to them. And my mother was considered a pioneer in having the youngsters go out and do that activity on their own. When I was much older, sometime in my 30s during the 1970s, Mother and I had one of those long conversations while driving. Sometimes those are the best talks, especially in the dark. This one about conservation. At the time, she was attending a Lutheran church in Alexandria, Virginia, and she shared with me that there were many scientists also attending that church, and they had warned the members that the environment was failing and needed help. And that's when I realized that nature was in danger. To be perfectly honest, I should share with you that one of those scientists felt that in the 1970s, it was almost too late. I hate to say that, but that is how the person felt. In honor of my mother, I would like to use one of her favorite hymns. It is not in our Unitarian hymnal, and that is, "This is my Father's world." When I think of the words, I substitute creator, that's the Native American side of me, but I'm going to keep the original words because she loved them and also as a nod to the UUs who identify as Christian UUs under our umbrella. So a little bit of story about it. The composer of the poetry was a Presbyterian minister, Maltby Babcock, and he was arguably the most remarkable student at Syracuse University. He came from an aristocratic family, was a brilliant scholar, and had a winning personality. He was very athletic and very musical. He would have been successful in any profession, but decided to go to Auburn Theological Seminary, and he became a pastor at First Presbyterian Church in Lockport, New York. Lockport is between Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, and almost every morning he would go out hiking, and he would tell his secretary that he was going out into his father's world. He later became the minister at Brown Memorial Church in Baltimore, and then in Brick Presbyterian Church in New York City. And unfortunately, he died at the age of 42 on a trip to Italy, and because he contracted a deadly bacterial fever while on the ship on the way over. That was in 1901, and his wife collected most of his sermons and writings and published them. So the poetry for this came from him in 1901. And Emily will read the words, very beautiful words, as we go on. There's another commentary I found about it in a different compendium, and it says, as we follow Dr. Babcock's example and give praise for all the beauty in this world, we cannot help being concerned that much of the loveliness is being destroyed by human carelessness and greed. The real answer to our ecological problems must be a renewed appreciation of the world and taking greater responsibility for taking care of it.
This is my Father's world. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world. The birds their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white declare their Maker's praise. This is my Father's world. He shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass, I hear him pass. He speaks to me everywhere.
Lisa,
Yes.
just so you know, we're having trouble hearing the music.
Okay, I think we'll just stay with the words from now on. Thank you. It's
All right.
around the corner, so that makes it a little hard.
Yeah.
I want to start off with Ansel Adams, who I didn't have time to talk about the last time. Ansel Adams was born in 1902 and lived until 1984. He was born in San Francisco as an only child. One of his earliest memories, not surprisingly, is of the San Francisco earthquake in 1906 when he was 4 years old. Although he was not injured in the first wave of the earthquake, he was injured during an aftershock, and he was tossed face first into a garden wall, and he had a crooked nose for the rest of his life, which necessitated mouth breathing for all those years. In 1907, the family moved to a different location in San Francisco near the Seacliff neighborhood. And he said his home had a splendid view of the Golden Gate and the Marin Headlands. He was a hyperactive child, prone to frequent sickness. He had few friends, and he got tossed out of a lot of schools. He had little patience for games or sports, but he enjoyed the beauty of nature from an early age. His father had a 3-inch telescope, and they enthusiastically shared the hobby of amateur astronomy, visiting the Lick Observatory on Mount Hamilton together. His father later served as a secretary of the Astronomical Society of the Pacific for 25 years. He was dismissed from some private schools for being restless and inattentive, and so when he was 12, his father decided to remove him from school. For the next 2 years, he was educated by private tutors and his Aunt Mary and his father. Aunt Mary was a big believer in the ideas of Robert G. Ingersoll, the well-known agnostic. He also believed in women's suffrage, and so many of Ansel Adams' approaches to life are influenced by those ideas. He graduated with an 8th grade education, finally, from Mrs. Kate Wilkins Private School. And after that, he displayed his diploma in the guest bathroom of his home. His father raised him to follow the ideas of Ralph Waldo Emerson, to live a modest, moral life guided by social responsibility to man and nature. Ansel Adams had a loving relationship with his father, but a very distant relation to his mother, who did not approve of his interest in photography. I repeat that. She did not approve of his interest in photography. On his first trip to Yosemite, which was a family vacation, his father gave him, are you ready, a Kodak #1 Brownie Model B box camera. I had a little Model B myself, and so I know exactly what he was dealing with. He contracted Spanish flu in 1918. Now, doesn't that ring a connecting bell to today? He vividly read photography magazines, attended camera club meetings, went to photography and art exhibits, and explored the High Sierra during the summer with retired geologist and amateur ornithologist Francis Holman, who became known as Uncle Frank. At age 17, Adams joined the Sierra Club, a group dedicated to protecting the wild places of the earth, and he was hired as a summer caretaker for the Sierra Club visitor facility at Yosemite Valley. He was a member throughout his lifetime and later served as director. He had many different assignments that kept bread on the table, and some of his clients included Kodak, Fortune Magazine, would you believe Pacific Gas and Electric Company, AT&T, and the American Trust Company. He was also later named the editor of the U.S. Camera and Travel, at the time the most popular photography magazine in the U.S. He was distressed by the American-Japanese internment that occurred after the Pearl Harbor attack, and he requested entrance into the Manzanar War Relocation Center in Owens Valley. And his resulting photo essay appeared in Museum of Modern Art exhibit. It was later published as Born Free and Equal, the story of loyal Japanese Americans. Upon its release, the book was met with distressing resistance, and some considered him disloyal. The work was a significant departure from his usual photography. He also contributed to the war effort by doing many photographic assignments for the military, including making prints of secret Japanese installations in the Aleutian Islands. In his autobiography, he expressed concern about Americans' loss of connection to nature in the course of industrialization and exploitation of the land's natural resources. He stated, "We all know the tragedy of the dust bowls, the cruel, unforgivable erosions of the soil, the depletion of fish or game, and the shrinking of the noble forests. And we know that such catastrophes shrivel the spirit of people. The wilderness is pushed back, and man is everywhere. Solitude, so vital to the individual man, is almost nowhere." For his conservation efforts, he received the Sierra Club John Muir Award in 1963, Conservation Service Award from the Department of the Interior in 1968, and in 1980, President Jimmy Carter awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his efforts to preserve the country's wild and scenic areas, both on film and on Earth. So an interesting look at his life. I had mentioned Jane Goodall in my biographical vignettes of my June program, but I wanted to continue a little bit with her because she was the winner for the 1921 Templeton Prize, honoring individuals whose life's work embodies a fusion of science and spirituality. And it's a very prestigious award, and it has a large monetary prize that goes with it. Past winners included Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. The 2020 honoree was Dr. Francis Collins of NIH and the leader of the Human Genome Project. She said of her work, "Out there by myself in nature, when you're alone, you can become part of nature and your humanity doesn't get in the way. It's almost like an out-of-body experience when suddenly you hear different sounds and you smell different smells and you're actually part of the tapestry of life. But every time a little species vanishes, it might not seem important, but the thread is pulled from that tapestry and the picture gets weaker as more threads are pulled until that tapestry, once so beautiful, is hanging in tatters." And concerning religion, she said, "Some people seem to believe that we can live separated from nature. We can't. We're animals too." She said her mother always said, "You'll be brought up in a Christian family, so you worship God. But you might have born in Egypt and then you would worship Allah, or you might have been born in a Buddhist country or one with a Hindu religion." She said there can only be one God, and so the name that we call him, her, or it really doesn't matter. She concludes with, "The world is so full of magic and surprises. I like to keep an open mind, and I like to think of magic. I don't want us to find out all the answers." And she leaves it at that. Somebody I added to the list was Birut Galdikas, and her study was in orangutans. She, like Jane Goodall and Diana Fossey, was inspired by Louis Leakey, the paleoanthropologist, and she met with him and made a proposal for a study of the orangutans. She's still living, she's still very active, and her work, while campaigning actively on behalf of primate conservation research, she also continues field research. Among the lengthiest studies of mammals ever conducted, has expanded her work to include advocating for the rainforests. She's been featured in Life, New York Times, The Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, and National Geographic. She lives in Canada now, and she has been given the Office of the Order of Canada. I want to just give a little passing nod to Al Gore, born in 1948. A lot of us are familiar with his book, An Inconvenient Truth, Planetary Emergence of Global Warming and What We Can Do About It, and with all his work that he still continues to do for the environment. He became a vegan in 2013. He had earlier said that it's absolutely correct that the growing meat intensity of diets across the world is one of the issues connected to this global crisis, not only because of the carbon dioxide involved, but also because the water consumed in the process and is depleting our resources of water. And he said, "Well, over a year ago, I changed my diet to vegan just to see what it was like. I felt better and I've continued with it, and I'm likely to continue with it for the rest of my life." Governor Jay Inslee of the state of Washington on his website has this: "We can achieve the transformation in a way that supports our other public policy goals for economic development, reliable and affordable energy, good paying jobs, social equity, and environmental justice. We can make this transition in a way that both cleans up our air and jumpstarts our economy. We know it's possible because it's happening right now all over the state of Washington's culture of innovation, our skilled workforce, and competitive advantage." The amount of legislation that he has spearheaded through the Washington legislature is too long to mention, but I do want to say that most recently, the state of Washington has decided not to sell gas using small snow blowers and things like that. So they're being taken off the market because they produce a lot of hydrofluorocarbons as well as other things. A little bit of a low profile effort, which is very local, the Monocacy Hill Conservation Association. And I think Alan's connected with that. It operates across the street, across Geiger Road from my home. And the Conservation Association has managed to protect about 460 acres of free and open space in Amity Township. It's incredible because 3 times the township fathers tried to log the mountain, Monocacy Hill, for profit for the township. 3 times. Uh, Several of us had to go to the township and beg not to have that happen. One of the supervisors was kind enough in one year to go along with us to view where another township nearby had used logging to put money in the coffers for the township, and then he could see what a disastrous mess they had made of the trees and everything that particular park. And so that kind of turned the tide in our favor. Now we have a conservation association, which is has a long list of people, and I see cars there all the time. It's Lisa Marmentella, my neighbor, gave me this. We organized the group in response to the township proposal to do a logging operation in the mid-90s. We formed the organization as a 5013C nonprofit in 1996. Prior to that, Helen and John Brower had asked the township's permission to mark and maintain the trails. And some people from the Parks and Rec Board worked to put in public picnic tables, and kiosk was put in by the Eagle Scout project. Since that time, we've paid for and coordinated several grant projects for both park improvements and for work on invasives. And in addition to that, we maintain parking year-round, 6 miles of hiking trails, and other free public education programs. That's just wonderful living proof of what grassroots enthusiasm and work and coordination can do. And so we managed not to have logging on Geiger Road. A few things that I see as possible helps to keeping conservation going. This is small, but in Canberra, Australia, early in 2021, a group of 8 Australian teenage environmentalists were able to go to court, and although they couldn't stop one particular big project, they were able to get a judgment from Justice Morty Bromberg that the future welfare of young people needs to be considered in any legislation and any projects that involve conservation, that the burden should not fall on young people now. The teenagers were led by 17-year-old Anjali Sharma with the help of what they called a legal guardian, a Catholic nun, Sister Bridget Arthur, who at the time was 86 years old. Some good celebrations. We have a Memphis community celebrates after the crude oil pipeline proposal was scrapped. This community, this neighborhood, was considered the path of least resistance by energy giants proposing a new crude oil pipeline. After months of activism and resistance, a Black community in Memphis is celebrating in the announcement that construction of the pipeline has been called off. And former Vice President Gore was involved in that effort. In Billings, Montana, the Keystone XL crude oil pipeline was discontinued, and Canadian officials failed to persuade President Joe Biden to reverse his cancellation of the whole project. And it would have brought oil from Nebraska to other pipelines that fed refineries on the U.S. Gulf Coast. On a sad note, an Inca conservationist leader was murdered. He was the third. Another one earlier, he and another earlier one this year, and a lady in 2016 were murdered. Nobody was ever charged. Nothing ever happened about it, but they were Native folks looking to conserve their area. September of this year, the Penn East pipeline was dropped. Its plans were to build a massive natural gas pipeline through the Lehigh Valley and beyond. The announcement was made, and when it was made, environmentalists were cheering. The pipeline's been canceled, said Maya von Rossum of the Delaware River Keepers Network. Local activists, organizers, elected officials at all levels are celebrating, added Eric Benson of the Clean Water Act, New Jersey. Pennsylvania and New Jersey landowners, environmentalists, and legislators, like New Jersey Congressman Tom Malinowski, celebrated Penny's pulling the plug on its 116-mile billion-dollar pipeline. The project had been set to run through large tracts of preserved land, parks, and environmentally sensitive areas using eminent domain, both the Keystone and the Garden State. Most of you probably know that President Biden restored Bears Ears and Grand Escalante staircase, original size. That was in October of 2021. Also, some redwood forests have been given back to the Indians. I love it. A conservation group is turning over a historic redwood grove on the Northern California coast to descendants of the original Native American inhabitants there. Although it's considered a small measure, they'll save some redwood trees and put them back in the hands of people to protect them. As the COP26 conference got organized, Pope Francis had a meeting with many of the higher echelon of the Catholic Church in Rome. He addressed those folks prior to the Glasgow Conference, and he referred to a joint appeal he and other religious leaders had signed this week that calls for governments to commit to ambitious goals at the conference, which experts consider a critical opportunity to tackle the threat of global warming. To meet this challenge, everyone has a role to play, Francis told the lawmakers. That of political and government leaders is especially important and crucial. We owe this to the young, to future generations, he said. Caring for humanity's quote-unquote common home, Pope Francis said it's not just a matter of discouraging and penalizing improper practices, but also, and above all, concretely encouraging new paths to pursue that are better suited to climate protection objectives and to contributing to the positive outcome of COP26. Pope had met with Nancy Pelosi at that same conference, and she replied, His Holiness's leadership is a source of joy and hope for Catholics and for all people, challenging each of us to be good stewards of God's creation, to act on climate, to embrace the refugee, the immigrant, the poor, and I like this, to recognize the dignity and divinity in everyone. Queen Elizabeth, although she had to attend the conference in Glasgow online rather than in person because she had been ill shortly before that, said in her message, which almost reminded me of her first message when it was clear that she would become queen, which she did not expect at that early age because of her father's early demise. In her usual graciousness, she said, I'm delighted to welcome you all to the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference. And it is perhaps fitting that you have come together in Glasgow, Scotland, once the heartland of the Industrial Revolution, but now a place to address climate change. She honored her late husband, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, in her address, saying that she was especially happy to speak on the effects of climate change, as that was a subject close to his heart. I remember that in 1969, he told an academic gathering, if the world pollution situation is not critical at the moment, it is as certain as anything can be that the situation will become increasingly intolerable within a very short time. She added that she took great pride in his advocacy for the environment, and she pointed out that his advocacy is being carried on by her son, Charles, and by a grandson, William, and both of those men were taking part in COP26 in person. She said, I for one hope that this conference will be one of those rare occasions where everyone will have the chance to rise above the politics of the moment and achieve true statesmanship. It's my hope of many, and it's the hope of many, that the legacy of this summit, written in history books yet to be printed, will describe you as leaders who did not pass up the opportunity and that you answered the call for future generations. See, one of the son or grandson said that we should give up space tourism and use all that money and resource and talent on fixing the world instead. Of course, one of the great attendees at the COP26 conference was Sir David Attenborough, and the name of his speech is "The World is Looking to You." Speaking to the audience, including President Joe Biden, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Attenborough said the climate emergency comes down to a single number: the concentration of carbon in our atmosphere. He pointed out that CO2 greatly determines global temperature and that changes in that one number is the clearest way to chart our story. We need to rewrite it to turn this tragedy into triumph, he said. We are, after all, the greatest problem solvers the world has ever known, and now we understand the problem. We know how to stop the number rising and put it in reverse. We must halt carbon emissions this decade. Attenborough, who strode to the stage with a purpose that belied his 95 years, delivered his speech along with a film that illustrated 300,000 years of atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, along with accompanying increases and decreases in average global temperatures. Also shown were climate activists from around the world with messages of and hope. Attenborough emphasized the fact that little more than 10,000 years before the present, the Earth's climate stabilized, allowing human civilization to flourish. Earth's climate stabilized, allowing human civilization to flourish. Everything we've achieved in the last 10,000 years was enabled by the stability during this time. And he showed that the climate had not wavered by more than plus or minus 1 degree Celsius over that entire period of 10,000 years. But now, he stressed, the conditions are changing rapidly because of human activity. Our burning of fossil fuels, our destruction of nature, our approach to industry, construction, and learning are releasing carbon into the atmosphere at an unprecedented pace and scale. We're already in trouble, and the stability will all depend on breaking this. Those who have done the least to cause the problem are being the hardest hit, pointing out that the poorest countries have released the least CO2, and the atmosphere, or those are the people are bearing the brunt of extreme weather conditions. He concluded, however, with an upbeat message. We must use the opportunity to create a more equal world, he said, and our motivation should not be fear, but hope. To avert further instability, the international community must focus on keeping temperature change within 1.5 degrees Celsius for this century, as prescribed by the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. With scientific fact for us all to know. I'm going to end up major part of my presentation with quotations from 2 people. And I'll let you guess. Okay, in a conversation after a specific exciting event, this was heard from, I'll let you guess. But to see the blue color go whoop by, and now you're staring into blackness. That's the thing. The covering of blue was the sheet, this blanket, this comforter of blue that we have all around us. We think, oh, that's blue sky. Suddenly, you shoot through it all of a sudden, as though you whip off a sheet and you're asleep when you're asleep, and you look into blackness, ugly blackness, and you look down and there's blue and the black up there. And it's just, there's Mother Earth and comfort. It's weird, but not as weird as the covering of blue. This is what I never expected. Oh, it's one thing to say, oh, the sky and the thing is fragile. It's all true. But what isn't true, what is unknown until you do it, is there's this pillow, this soft blue. Look at the beauty of that color, and it's so thin, and you're through it in an instant. What I would love to do is to communicate as much as possible the jeopardy, the moment you see how The vulnerability of everything. It's so small. The air which is keeping us alive is thinner than your skin. It's a silver, it's immeasurably small, and when you think in terms of the universe, it's negligible, this air. And you've probably guessed that was William Shatner as he came down from his shot into space. More compelling, I thought, was comments from a French astronaut. His name is Thomas Piquet, and he was wrapping up his second tour in the International Space Station. And that happened during the Glasgow Conference. And he presented this. He said, the haunting fragility of humanity's only home, floating like a blue but also tarnished pearl in the vastness of space. Through the portholes of the International Space Station, French astronaut has an arresting view of global warming's repercussions. He used a video call from space to sound the alarm as negotiators, government officials, and activists continued their meeting. From up here, we see the pollution of rivers, atmospheric pollution, things like that. What really shocked me on this mission were extreme weather climate phenomenon. We saw entire regions burning from the space station. In Canada, in California, we saw all of California covered by a cloud of smoke and flames with the naked eye from 250 miles up. From space, the fragility of Earth is a shock, he said. It's a sensory experience to see just how isolated we are as an oasis with limited resources. Year after year, we also know we are beating records for fires, for storms, for floods, and that's very, very visible. I very clearly saw the difference compared to my mission of 4 or 5 years ago. If I were you, I would check out some things that he has online in various forms. It's, to me, more exciting, more compelling than any of the other statements that I read. Thank you for listening. I'm going to finish up with the words to another hymn, and that's just because I love the hymn. And in our book, that's hymn 207, Earth is Given as a Garden. Before Emily reads the words, I want to tell you that the tune has a name, and the name of this tune is Heifriedal, and it was written in about 1855. It's used in many hymnals, many hymns. It appears 3 times in Singing the Living Tradition, and once, and one we know best, is in the Blue Teal book for Blue Boat Home. And it was hard for me to decide which set of words of the garden.
Earth was given as a garden, cradle for humanity, tree of life and tree of knowledge placed for our discovery. Here was home for all your creatures born of land and sky and sea, all created in your image, all to live in harmony. Once again the garden, all life flows fresh and free. Gently guide your sons and daughters into full maturity. Teach us how to trust each other, how to use for good our power, how to touch the earth with reverence, then once more will Eden flower.
I want to show another of Ansel Adams' beautiful photograph, also from Yosemite Valley. And his closing words, I want to read what he said. Had it not been for those early hikes in the Sierra, if I had not experienced that memorable first trip to Yosemite, if I had not been raised by the ocean, if, everything I have done or felt is in some way influenced by the impact of the natural. It is easy to recount that I camped many times at Merced Lake, but it is difficult to explain the magic. To lie in a small recess of granite matrix of the Sierra and watch the progress of dusk to night, the incredible brilliance of the stars, the waning, glittering sky, dawn, and the following sunrise on the peaks and the domes around me. And always that cool dawn wind that I believe to be the prime benediction of the Sierra. These qualities to which I still deeply respond were distilled into my pictures over the decades. I knew my destiny when I first experienced Yosemite. And say with us, we extinguish our chalice flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you for joining our service, and please stay on if you wish to participate in the coffee hour, which will start almost immediately. Thank you.